Good morning, friends. I wanted to talk today about the royals for something a little different, a little lighter. Some of the Epstein stuff we've been talking about is disturbing, and the royals are a much lighter subject for us. So let's just take a wander down the royal lane. So I know a lot of monarchy watchers, whether you're hate watching or whether you like what the royal family does, their charity work and that type of thing. Most people assume that the British monarchy, having lasted 1,000 years, is not going to go under now. I'm not so sure about that anymore. I used to feel that way. Now I'm not so sure. The Andrew and Sarah Epstein scandal has been handled so badly by Charles that there's no redeeming his reign, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think anyone but the staunchest of royalists see Charles as anything but a dithering fool. And he's made it clear that the only way he'll take action, even against Andrew with these heinous accusations, the only way he would take action was once he started getting heckled in the streets. He only does something about Andrew every time he gets heckled. And then he sends out his people, like, Jenny Bond, Dickie Arbiter, all them. And they're like, the king doesn't need to be heckled. He knows. Clearly, he doesn't because he only takes action when he gets heckled. So Charles is done as far as I'm concerned. He's flubbed it up too badly. There's no redeeming his reign. He just looks like a fool from here on out. The only one who can save it now is people have some expectation that William might be better. I'm not sure unless he gets his head on straight because William has been waffling back and forth about Beatrice and Eugenie. Now, I know a lot of people are under the impression that holding any of the Epstein stuff against Beatrice and Eugenie, a lot of people think that doing so is on par with blaming the child for the sins of the parents. I do not agree. Now, first off, they're not children, and they were not children whenever they went with Sarah to visit Epstein while he was on house arrest and had just gotten out of prison for child sex crimes, for soliciting a minor. And that was a huge plea down, a sweetheart plea. And they knew that. Sarah knew that. If Beatrice and Eugenie didn't know that, then frankly, they should probably be cut out of the royal family anyway because they have an extreme lack of good judgment. It's always easy to tell whenever anyone from the royal family has briefed the press because the headline will say something like, William says, blah, blah, blah. And then you read the article and it's like, sources from inside the palace have confirmed that William feels, blah, blah, blah. Charles does it too. They all do it. Well, initially, after Andrew's Duke of York and Prince title was stripped, there was a briefing that appeared to be from William saying that Beatrice and Eugenie absolutely would not be affected, their titles or nothing. Well, then more stuff started coming out. More kept coming out about how, oh, they went to visit Epstein as adults. Sarah told Epstein that Beatrice would vouch for her phone call clearing Epstein of being a pedophile. And Beatrice also advised Andrew on his Newsnight interview. She thought it was a great idea. So, yeah, no judgment whatsoever. So, in my opinion, if William doesn't get up the gumption to cut off Beatrice and Eugenie from all the perks, I think he's going to end up in the same situation as Charles. And I think most of us royal watchers know how Charles got in this situation. A lot of people have been wondering, like, what is Charles's holdback? The royal roto reporters come out and talk about things like, well, Charles doesn't want to offend his mother. I know she's dead, but he still feels that she knows. And she asked him to take care of Andrew. And then they'll say stuff like, well, Charles is head of the Church of England. Doesn't he need to exercise Christian forgiveness? He believes so. Even as it becomes more and more apparent not only how debaucherous Andrew was in illegal and depraved manners on the public dime while doing royal duties and while doing his British trade envoy thing that the Queen gave him to keep him busy. It becomes more and more clear to the public that Andrew is not just an oaf, he's a criminal. And he was an entitled criminal protected at the highest levels. Sadly, Beatrice and Eugenie have had their morals and training and judgment imparted to them by Sarah and Andrew, and it shows. It really, really shows. And going back to that 2019 Newsnight interview that Andrew was so entitled, he thought he could just, say, well, I was at a Pizza Express in Woking, and that would just be the end of it. Let's take a look here. This book is Scoops. This is from Sam McAllister, one of the producers that worked with Emily Maitlis on this. She wrote a book about it afterwards and talks about her surprise during the negotiations for the interview. Listen, friends. Sam says, from my research and conversations, I was confident that Prince Andrew would be fun to negotiate with. He seemed open, confident, energetic, boisterous, and thick skinned, and so I had assumed that, despite the circumstances, the negotiation would likely be good natured. I could take a few risks in my tone, possibly even some banter. It would all come down to trust and who he felt most comfortable with. And then we skip to the next page, and she says, suddenly he appeared from around the corner of the short corridor. Morning, his voice was upbeat. He was smiling. He seemed friendly. I hope you don't mind, but I brought someone with me. This was not something any of us expected to hear. We exchanged glances. Who could it be? A lawyer? Someone else in communications? Maybe someone from the Queen's staff? And then from behind him, Princess Beatrice appeared. To be frank, the only thing worse than speaking to a prospective interviewee about allegations of sexual impropriety, pedophilia, and sex with a 17-year-old girl is having to do so in front of his daughter. Princess Beatrice was polite and engaged, carrying a notebook and a pen, but she was evidently anxious about the meeting, unlike her father. The atmosphere palpably changed for us all. Sam says Princess Beatrice was a total curveball. I had heard that she was close to the Queen, who might well ask her for her opinion on the meeting, and also knew that she was very close to his father and clearly there to protect his interests. Now, this is an interesting part. Sam says it became clear that Princess Beatrice was very attentive and that Prince Andrew liked my less formal side. Well, of course he did. I became more congenial. There were some moments of laughter. One second we'd talk legal matters. The next minute we talk about something more personal. I even managed to get in an anecdote about how my mom had once worked for Robert Maxwell. Oh, Sam, I wonder if her mom lost her pension. Now here's another part. This is not about Beatrice, it's about Andrew and Ghislaine. Sam says, for his part, the prince showed us huge trust. Remember, this is in 2019, before he lost everything right after Epstein had killed himself, and everyone was still holding up Ghislaine, being like, "Well, I don't even know Epstein, I knew Ghislaine," like she was an innocent person. Sam says, for his part, the prince showed us huge trust. He told us things that are now global knowledge, which no journalist had likely ever heard before. In that tiny room, for the first time, he revealed that he supposedly had an alibi. He told us about Pizza Express, a children's party. He mentioned the sweating or lack thereof. He talked about how recently he had seen Ghislaine Maxwell. He admitted he'd made errors of judgment. It was jaw dropping stuff. So yeah, he admitted he had recently he saw Ghislaine Maxwell probably after Epstein's death. Wild, friends. Now here's the kicker. We're back to Princess Beatrice. Sam says, and then he said something I will never forget. As we concluded things, he turned to Princess Beatrice and said that they had a lot to discuss and they should go straight after upstairs to talk about it over a cup of tea with Mum. For a split second, I almost scoffed. What on earth did a grown man need to talk to his mum for? My brain hadn't connected, and then it hit me. Mum was the queen. He was saying he was going to tell her about it. It was surreal. So, yeah, going back to what she said earlier about everyone knew that the queen was close to Beatrice, and Andrew and Beatrice went straight from the last negotiation up to talk to the queen. I think we can conclude that Beatrice probably helped influence the queen, that this Newsnight interview is a great idea. Now, personally, I'm glad that he did it because Andrew needed to be brought down. But from the aspect of Beatrice, who was clearly trying to protect her father, shows very, very bad judgment. Speaking of bad judgment, something that I always side eyed Meghan and Harry for whenever they did their Oprah interview, one of the things that made me start not liking them and starting to pick apart their lies, the places where their narrative just doesn't add up, is they came out of the royal family, left it, and accused everyone in the family of horrific things of racism, except Andrew and Fergie. They never mentioned any problems with Andrew and Fergie. Meghan bragged about Fergie teaching her how to curtsy, and Harry mentioned Andrew by simply saying, well, I never thought they would take my security because they didn't take Uncle Andrew's. Like, he's not offended that they protected Andrew at all. He's offended that he couldn't accuse them all of racism publicly and also get protected. He wanted the corruption to cover him as well. And Megan was supposedly friends with Eugenie before Harry, but she claims she didn't know who Andrew was. Oh, really? We're supposed to believe that someone who got a degree in international relations claims all the time that she is so meticulous and freakishly attentive to detail, was friends with someone who had princess in front of her name and didn't bother to find out who her father was and imparted that to her. Bullshit, bullshit. I think we know the reason why Charles tried so hard to protect Andrew until he was heckled in the street and had to move because he couldn't handle that. Is because Charles and Andrew did not like the Queen's personal private secretary who'd been with her for years and years, Sir Christopher Guyt, because he didn't put up with any nonsense and he protected the Queen from Charles trying to take more power than what he was due yet and other things like that. Well, Andrew didn't like him either because he blocked Andrew sometimes from trying to get to the Queen, talk her into things that Sir Christopher Guyt knew would be bad for the monarchy and bad for the Queen. And it wasn't known at the time, but the Queen had cancer the last several years of her life, and I've read suffered from a bit of dementia. So Christopher Guyt would have been protecting her from people within the family who would try to take advantage of that. Charles and Andrew did a scheme together and they got him fired, got him ousted, and replaced with someone they like. And it's highly suspected that that's part of the reason why the last several years of her life she made so many errors of judgment. That she was sick with cancer, she had dementia, her personal private secretary, who had been her steering wheel for a long time through that, was suddenly gone. And then all of a sudden, every time there's a new revelation about Andrew, you see the Queen allowing him to walk her into church, getting photographed in a car with him, that kind of thing. In her earlier years, I don't know that that would have happened. I think she would have had the clarity, even in spite of him being her favorite, to not do that. But who knows? Could be wrong on that. But yeah, after Charles and Andrew worked together to push Sir Christopher Guyt out, then Charles started kind of doing more things than he ever had before as a prince, basically taking more power. And then when Philip died, everyone is shocked. Fergie's invited back to Sandringham and Royal Ascot and coming to the family Christmas. Allowed to do royal engagements again, going on ITV and Loose Women. There's all this rehabilitation of Fergie and a protection of Andrew. I think Charles made a deal with the devil to try and get power sooner because he had to wait so long. And it's come back to haunt him because he just looks like a fool for not doing anything about Andrew sooner. And I wonder if William is going to end up in the same boat with Beatrice and Eugenie. What do y'all think, friends? Let me know in the comments. We'll go out with palate cleanser and I hope everyone's having a good day.